You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brooke-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people, and Happy New Year. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And the next way you can walk this path is by joining us for Waking the Wild Medicine, which begins in March 2022. In this crucible, you will uncover the wild medicine of your soul, the gift to the world that you came here to be. You'll create the potent ways to administer this medicine via your own unique embodiment in alignment with divine archetypal energies. You'll be liberated to become the fullest expression of your soul, giving your deepest gifts in service to the world. In material terms, this means you become available for an abundance of connection, impact, and wealth, and anything else that your soul desires to flow as you. You can discover more and arrange a call with one of us to explore whether this is indeed aligned for you by going to primalhappiness.co/medicine. I'm really looking forward to getting to know your soul. And now on to this week's show. It's with Chris Lüttichau. Chris is the founder of Northern Drum Shamanic Centre, a UK-based educational organisation offering a renewed perspective on traditional shamanic and medicine teachings and a safe grounding from which to learn them, established in 1998. He is the keeper of an integral body of teachings that he shares in his workshops and ongoing training groups. The teachings cover a broad range of topics from healing, the art of dreaming, spirit contact, and the way of counsel. Chris is the author of the critically acclaimed book on shamanism, Calling Us Home, Find Your Path, Your Balance, and Inner Strength. He's also an international teacher and has appeared on TV and radio all over the world. In this show, we spoke about intuition and clairvoyance from a shamanic perspective. We explored how it's actually a practical tool that's been vital for human well-being, even survival, as long as humans have been around, the difference between intuition and instinct, and finally, how you can tune into your intuition and make use of it in your life. Although this is the first time you've heard Chris on the show, he and I have actually subsequently recorded 2 further shows, and we have another in the diary. So that might give you some indication of how much I loved speaking to Chris, how much he and I have in common, and how much gold I know that you, the listener, will get from our conversations. Let's dive in. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the show.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yeah, completely my pleasure. I could tell already we are going to get on really well and have an amazing conversation. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. What a magical topic, and one that I'm particularly excited to talk to you about for the reasons we were saying just before I hit record, that there is a groundedness, an embodiedness that I think shamanism and particularly you can bring to what can sound like quite a kind of new agey, woo sounding topic of things like intuition and clairvoyance. Is something particularly, again, grounded and embodied that I think we are going to be able to journey with into this topic. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think that intuition and clairvoyance in a shamanic context is everyday tool, basically. It definitely is that amongst indigenous people, amongst the traditional shamans, where their intuition is encouraged, the development of intuition is encouraged from childhood. And when you have a good connection to your intuition, you are able to make choices, you're able to receive guidance in all kinds of different situations in life. And that is a very basic thing for shamanic tribal people, because it helps them to survive. It helps them live in the physical world. And therefore, it is seen to be really important that they have that connection to their intuition.
Oh gosh, I love so much what you just said. It's so, it takes it from the view that I feel that we have here in a kind of modern culture of things like intuition being, I guess, a kind of like, at best, a nice to have, like it's a kind of something there that's kind of floating around. There's a bit of an optional thing. Most people have a very, hardly any connection to their intuition, full stop, but it's not really seen as a problem because it's a kind of, it's not a big deal to have intuition or not. And the way you said it has brought it into like this real, you've used words like basic and survival and tool. And I love that, it's like, no, held in a way that we have for most of human history is actually, just as much an important part of being human as having hands. Like it's just like how, of course, you would use the things at your disposal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could also say that when we make a decision, and if the decision turns out maybe not to be the wisest decision we could have made, and if we have made that decision without consulting our intuition, then if you look back at when you made that choice, then there will always have been a warning. And that warning usually comes as a very subtle voice. So the intuition speaks in a subtle way, usually. It speaks in a soft voice, whereas the mind is a lot louder and is therefore typically the one that gets our attention. But if we take the time and tune in, and if we allow ourselves to be a little bit more sensitive, then we can hear that whisper, which it often is from the intuition. And if we are about to make a choice and it's not the right choice, there will usually always be a warning, a little whisper, don't do this. But maybe we desire something, maybe we are very eager, maybe we are in a hurry. So we often will override the warning, override the intuition. And then we then pay the price later on. And in traditional shamanism, they're very aware of that they always listen to the whisper. Sometimes it's called the whisper in the wind. That was how one of my teachers in North America with an American Indian background, he referred to it. It was the whisper in the wind.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. So what was just occurring to me as you were speaking, I'm teaching a yearly program I do at the moment called Waking Wild Feminine, and the archetype we're journeying through at the moment is the wild woman, which I see as that kind of gives us that portal to instinct and intuition. And it's so what I see over and over again as women begin to listen to their intuition, they then see all the reasons that they haven't, which is because often their intuition will be saying no to the things that would be kind of rewarded in this culture if they do, if that makes sense. Like quite often it's really there to serve what's truly for us, rather than the things that would have us kind of, you know, fit in and conform. And so it can be really inconvenient when we start to. There's a very good reason not to listen to it. But of course, you know, it depends on the kind of life we want. Before we go any further, what I would love to hear you share, and this might sound like a really basic question, but I often notice when I ask the most basic questions, often there's gold that comes up in response. How would you define, and I know that we talked about two things at the beginning, intuition and clairvoyance. I'd love to hear your sense of those two things. How do you define them? What are they?
Yeah, okay. Clairvoyance literally means to see clearly. I think it maybe comes from Latin. And that concept to see clearly is actually also the definition of the shaman. The word shaman comes from the tribe called the Tungus tribe in Siberia. And it literally means the one who sees, the one who knows with clarity. So clairvoyance is this ability to perceive with clarity those things that are beyond the physical. And perceiving, I use that word because it's not only seeing. It can when you have clairvoyant abilities, it also can be other ways than just the sight. It can be hearing, it can be feeling, it can be sensing. I usually talk about 5 major psychic ways. So one is through sight, one is through hearing, one is through feeling, and one is a cognitive one where it's kind of through thoughts. It's a mental one, and it's actually very, very reliable, maybe the most reliable of them all. And then finally, there is the kinetic one, where the information comes through movement and the energy. Those are the main 5 psychic ways. And intuition is also connected to instincts. So the instincts are basically connected to the generally lower energy centers. And they also have to do with the flight and fight instincts. And instincts can be very, very useful also. So if there's a danger, the instincts can tell us stop, or they can tell us wait, or they may tell us to go ahead. And it's good to always listen to that gut feeling. And sometimes instincts can also mislead us, though, because if there's something, we get an instinctual feeling that something we want, we desire something, and then we may get excited about it, and we go after it, and it's from that instinctual level. It may not be taking into consideration the consequences in the future. So those kind of instincts are usually always focused in the now, focused on the now, and what is happening right now. So with instincts, it's usually always a good idea to listen to that feeling in the belly. But if you're not quite sure it's right, then you go up to the heart or up to the third eye and consult the heart and the third eye, and they will then tell you if you should go ahead or if you shouldn't follow what the instincts are telling you. And then if we look at the word intuition, that has to do with the communication from the soul. And it is a kind of communication that comes from a high place. It comes from a place that you can trust. It comes from a place that is of a high vibration. But when I train people in my groups in intuition and clairvoyance, I do use this concept high intuition as opposed to regular intuition. And that is because intuition can sometimes be tainted by the personality. So what we may perceive as an intuitive voice and intuitive command may have been influenced by things from the ego, things from the personality. And sometimes, there have been people who have been to a psychic and come back, and it hasn't necessarily always been a pleasant experience. And that would, from my perspective, have to do with that the person who has tuned in has not been in as high an energy as they could have been. So in order to reach that place of high intuition, there needs to be a high energy level. Also the energetic system of the person needs to be balanced, and there needs to be a connection to higher consciousness. And if those things are in place, then we have what I call high intuition. And then intuition, that information that comes through is absolutely reliable and for the highest and the best.
Of all, I would say, actually. Would you agree? That's what I notice, the kind of the higher or the purer that we're receiving from intuition, the more and more it actually serves all, not just the one who's receiving that intuitive message.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And when it is pure, as you say, then that's a sign that it comes from the level of the soul. And it's not kind of polluted, so to say, by desires and by personality and the ego. It means that the channel is clear, and that is a high art, and that is something that can be trained. So to learn to use the intuition and to learn to raise the vibration is something that we can train. And if we do that, then we have a source of guidance that is very, very valuable, because it can help us, especially during these times where a lot of people have difficulties in many different ways, psychologically and financially and health-wise and so forth. It's very important to be able to tune in and to know what is the right choice now, both for oneself and maybe for children also, and not to be lost in confusion, which is what happens if we only rely on the mind. Because the mind has this nature that it always goes around in circles, and it's a polarity organ. And it will always say maybe yes and maybe no. And that means that it very rarely reaches a state of clarity.
Yes, it's kind of operating within almost like a closed unit, isn't it? It can only operate within what looks possible, what looks available within what it already knows.
Yeah, within what it already knows, and then it tends to change its mind also. After a
yes,
while.
Like you say, for the polarities within what it knows. Completely.
Yeah.
I love what you've just said there. Firstly, I'm glad I asked you that really basic question, because there was real gold in your reply. So thank you for that. I really agree with what you've just said, that it's these times in particular, these things that, again, can sound kind of intangible and, to some people, again, a bit of a kind of nice to have. When we've have that really deep sense of intuition, instinct, how practical it is. And again, particularly at times like this, I can say for myself, and even hearing you just say that, it's made this even clearer for me. Through the last almost couple of years, where there's been just so much I guess unrest going on in the world, the thing that's become increasingly clear to me is how guided I have been. There's been almost no times where I've been kind of like feeling like I'm wrestling with a decision. It's just been so clear to me all the time, what's for me, what's for me, what's for me. And it's made this, in some ways, like I felt quite fortunate. Like, why am I finding this as easy to navigate as I am? And it's for the very reason you're saying. It's because I'm not getting caught in that kind of trying to figure out of my mind. It's because I just have such a clear sense all the way through of where I need to go next. And it's because I already had that, and it's increasing all the time, but I already had such a deep connection to my intuition that it's just there. And by now I've kind of like stress tested it enough that I rely on it. I don't even question that that's not going to be right. I know it serves me. And it's just such a deeply practical example of it being the tool that you said it was right at the beginning. Like, it really does act that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you just said now reminds me of an American Indian. He was with a group of Westerners, and they were discussing things, and they had been discussing for a very long time, and they couldn't find any clarity or agreement. And then he stood up and he said, "When you have to think, you don't know." And then he walked out. So
oh my goodness. I got goosebumps then. Yes.
so that statement comes from people who are in tune with their intuition. And a fascinating thing for me is that in the West, we very much rely on the mind and the five senses. And we kind of think that the intuition is inferior. But if you think about it in relation to, for example, if there's an accident and the police comes and there were cars involved, and say are 10 witnesses, the police will interview the 10 people, and they will get 10 different stories because the five senses are not that reliable. The mind is not that reliable. One person will say it was a yellow car that speeded away. Another one will say that it was a red car. And that for me means that the five senses and the mind cannot be trusted to such a high level as intuition can. Indigenous people, shamanic tribal people, they are aware of that. And therefore, shamans traditionally will rely more on their intuition than on the five senses.
I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking, I love the distinction you made earlier about instincts and how they're very kind of focused in the now. I think that's a really good way of describing. They can work, when it really is a life or death situation that we need to take action in now. Firstly, it's really evident, like there's some kind of threat that we need to, run from or fight or whatever. it's bleeding obvious. Like, that's the kind of point of it, really. It's like, it's meant for something that we do something about here and now. And I think for all kinds of reasons, as you've said, our instincts can be triggered in situations that aren't actually what our instincts are reacting to. And I think that's also particularly in this modern world where a lot of us are operating from fear of all sorts of things that aren't really a threat. And so our instincts are being kind of triggered into fight or flight by, I don't know, a comment someone's made about us on Facebook, or I don't know, a bill that's come through the door. There's a lot of things that will trigger that kind of instinctual response. And as you're saying, if we then react to that, we're probably not actually acting in a way that will serve us. That very much, when there isn't an obvious threat that we do need to take action on. I love the way you're saying, that's when it's actually an invitation to pause and look more deeply, tune into intuition, which is more likely to serve. And as you were talking about senses then, I was like, yeah, it feels that the 5 senses are very much more linked to instinct, as in they're a good way to pick up, like, is there a threat here that, the instincts are being triggered, but are probably likely to get in the way of intuition. And I think so that they're kind of a really good servant, but not a great master.
Yeah, absolutely. And those instincts, they are connected to the old reptilian part of the brain, and animals have them also. And that is why wild animals, they are so good at surviving, because they know things instantaneously, and they can make a very quick decision that usually is the right decision, and it can survive. And if we can use our instincts in that way, then they are an amazing resource to have. But like you were talking about, if we get caught in that old fight and flight way of living and thinking, then we live basically in fear. And so that's why we need to be able to separate ourselves from that place, and take it up to the heart, take it up to the third eye, and look into, okay, is this right? Is this the right thing to do? And the heart will always tell you the right answer. And it is.
You might not like it, but
no. It's usually always the first thought that comes. And like you say, if we don't like it, then we'll question and say, oh well, maybe that's another possibility. But if the heart has already said, even before you had finished formulating the question, the heart has already given you the answer.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Then that's it. That is your intuition that's speaking there.
Yeah.
But that's what I was talking about in the beginning, that the mind is much louder and knows how to get our attention, whereas the intuition is, you could almost use the word shy. So it doesn't bang hard on the door. It whispers to you, and it offers you this guidance. But what you need to do, what we need to do, is to learn to be sensitive to that whisper, to that guidance. And it sounds like you have done that. You say you live from that place, but that's because you are tuned in and not relying entirely on the stories in the mind. And in the West, that is an issue. Most people, they trust the mind over intuition.
And kind of intentionally so, as a culture. Going back to what you said at the start, how what we can see if we look at indigenous cultures, the intuition is valued, and therefore that's something you're going to be guided and trained in. Conversely, in a modern culture, it's your mind you're going to be trained to use. that's the tool that's really valued, and you're going to be trained to use, only in some ways, not always, and not at all in terms of having that understanding of how intuition would talk. So it's no wonder we find ourselves with this kind of very mind heavy way of navigating the world. And I think, having an understanding that that's what's going on in itself is a helpful start. I think the conversation we're having is a really helpful conversation to have, like to know that's the lay of the land means you can start to make choices to do things differently.
Yeah. And we in the West, we are paying a high price today for having always only followed the mind and not listen to the intuition. So that's basically what we are facing today. What do we do about that? But
and then not try and solve that with the mind, which is what's going on too, isn't it? It's like what a mess we found ourselves in. Let's try and think ourselves to an answer.
Exactly, yeah. But I think you could say that intuition works in two main ways. And one is the chaotic way, so to say, where the guidance will just come when you have not asked for it. It will come unexpectedly. And it will come out of the blue. And we need to be tuned in order to hear that one. That spontaneous intuition that just comes. The other one is one you can train, and that basically means it's a planned one where you have a certain practice that can get you in touch with your intuition, and you can bring a question, for example, to your intuition and ask, what do I do about this situation here? So there are two ways, and it's good to be able to be familiar and comfortable with both of them. Because it may be that some people, they do get these messages that come out of the blue, and they're able to hear them. But then the next step would then be to also, whenever you need guidance, to be able to sit down, do what it takes in order to be in a place where you can open up to the intuition and then get the information, usually very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. I love the way you've distinguished between those two different forms it can take. That really aligns with my experience too. I often find the ones that come out of the blue are completely like devoid of any, it's just like, what? Like, why? And I guess the work, and certainly for my work for me, is to trust, okay, I've no idea why this thing has appeared as the next thing I need to do, but I'm going to trust it is, even though it makes no sense to me. I may not even really want to do it, and yet I'm going to trust there is a really good reason. And I often find with those things, it can be a good year down the line before I discover why that intuitive hit came through and that actually was perfect. But I often find with those things, it can take a good year for that to become clear. I don't know if that's, that tends to be the bigger things, the things that are most like, what on earth? But I don't know if your experience has been like that, or mine are just particularly weird.
No, I agree that it doesn't necessarily make sense to the mind when that intuitive guidance comes. The mind will go, that doesn't apply now, and I can't see why that I should do that. And then maybe a few years later, you pay the price for having overridden that.
Yeah, because it doesn't tend to go away. It keeps knocking in one way or another. That's what I found. So I've learned to take notice now, most of the time at least. So you mentioned earlier about the different forms that clairvoyance can take, and I just want to check I'm joining in dots correctly, that I don't want to kind of put words into your mouth that you've not said. So I think what you're saying is those forms of clairvoyance are ways that intuition can speak to us. Is that the connection you were making?
Yes, exactly. So some people, they have the ability to see things, and that is what is called clairvoyance. But others will also get that intuitive guidance, and through hearing. It's referred to as clairaudience, I think, and then there's the people who are clairsensitive, who pick up the information through feeling. So there are those 5 different ones. The 4th one is claircognitive, where the information can come as a knowing in the form of thought. And then the 5th one, kinetic, where it comes through movement and energy. But the thing here is that in order to learn to trust your intuition, for many people, you need to find out which one of the 5 is your main one. And often people have maybe 2 or 3 that combined will open up their intuition. So that to find out exactly which ones come through for you is an important piece of work when you begin to really say yes to working intuitively. And then there are other ways also. So some people, they get the information when they go out in nature. Some people do best and get most clear information when they sit with their back up against a tree.
That's one of my, that's like my number one way. In fact, I think that's like how I learned actually how to listen to my intuition, was exactly that, the connection I created with an oak tree.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then there are also those for whom sitting by a stream or a river is the right way. So that is an important thing to find out what works for you. And then when you have a question, you go out and activate that channel that is the best one for you. And some people, they have what we call instant knowing, where it just comes through almost like a lightning, and there's just no doubt about it. And that's an amazing resource to have. So to learn how each person functions, and then to say yes to the psychic abilities, and say yes to using them, and to use them also with respect. So that has to do with how you use them. For example, it's generally a good idea to ask another person permission first before you give them the information that you have picked up, rather than volunteering and telling them without having had their permission first. Because we are kind of maybe interfering a little bit with their free will if we tell them this is what's going to happen in 3 years for you, without them having asked first.
Yes, yeah, that really is good advice. I found it fascinating the way that we all do receive that information differently. I only found out very recently. I was driving in the car with my children. We were talking about archetypes, and I was archetypes are something I work a lot with, and I was trying to explain it to them, but I thought I'd do it in a way that brings the archetypes to life for them. And so I was saying, think of a king, and because I'm very visual myself, I'd kind of, even though I work with people this all the time, because it's my children, I kind of wasn't realizing, they may be different to me. I think I just had this assumption because they're my children, they'll be very visual too. And even though I know that not everyone works that way. And so I asked that question. It wasn't until I got to about the 3rd archetype I realized my daughter was going into these like rhapsodies of like description of what the king looked like and then what the magician looked like. And then I realized my son hadn't said anything visual all the way through. He was just saying, I felt this and I felt this. And I suddenly said, hang on, are you seeing anything when you're saying this? And he said, no. And he's 13. And I only literally, like it was a month ago, discovered he's got aphantasia where he literally doesn't see any images in his mind's eye. And I had no idea that was the case. And it was just like, how on earth have I given like how much like these kinds of things occupy my life and my work? I had no idea that he didn't actually visualize at all. So it was, for me, it was a really good reminder, like how differently we don't just perceive intuition, but just, you know, how we are wired, how we process is vastly different. Like for me, I am very visual, although interestingly, a lot of the time with intuition, it's more a combination of either audient, or knowing, like you're saying. Sometimes it's visual, but less often, interestingly, even though in other ways I can be very visual.
Yeah, and when you know that, then you put yourself in a good place, because you can then open up for those channels, for the hearing and for the knowing and for the visual. So then you can invite the information to come, because you know what your most natural channels are.
Yes.
And then you begin to really be able to rely on those channels, and you just trust it more than you trust anything else.
And it is the combination, I think, as well. I think that's when we start to, you know, how you're saying intuition whispers. I think when we start to understand the tone of our particular type of whispers, it becomes much easier to receive it. I was just thinking of one particular example for me. Funny enough, it was about me training in shamanism, which was the furthest thing from my mind. I was literally sitting in the garden, just chilling out in the sunshine, and completely out of the blue, I saw a vision of a shamanic drum, and then just had this like knowing. It was more of a knowing, I think, than an audio. It was like, I'm going to train in shamanism. And then I simultaneously was like, no, I really don't want to do that. Thank you very much. But the fact the two things came together, like it was so clear. There was like no way I could not know it. It was like the knowing was there. And it was just like, oh, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time for like how long it's going to take me to submit to this knowing. But it was a really good example of how the way the two things happened together like that made it just, I couldn't ignore it. It was a whisper, but it was a whisper, but not really one that I could ignore.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the whisper can be very kind of insistent, and
yes. It's surprising how insistent a whisper can be.
Yeah, and that's when the higher self really wants us to get something.
Yeah.
So in this case, the higher self really wanted you to understand this is what you need to do.
Yeah. How do you, we're almost out of time, but it's a shame because there's so much I want to continue talking to you about. But one of the things that's just popped into mind related to that is how we can, and maybe you feel this is something different. So related to the example I just gave, as I say, I put it off because it wasn't something I really wanted to do. It was like, I know I'm going to have to do it at some point because the knowing was so clear, but I actually don't want to right now. It's really inconvenient. I just don't want to. And then over the next 6 months, I just kept getting like clearer and clearer, like whispers, getting to the point where I can't keep ignoring it. It really is just a timing thing now. And so I went for a walk and said, if it's meant to be now that I do it, send me a sign. And typically for me, those signs come in the form of feathers of like birds of prey and things like that. So that's what I was like, if I get that sign, I will do it now. If I don't, I'm going to put it off for longer. And then I found a whole dead buzzard,
Mm.
So I would love to have your sense of like, how do you see, if you do, that's linked to how we can use intuition?
Yeah, so signs and omens are also, of course, central old shamanic ways of getting guidance. And it is based on the fact that everything is connected, everything is one. So when we tune in away from our mind and into that place of the soul, into that place of the higher self and intuition, then we are connected to the what we call the sacred hoop of life, and that's where we can get signs. That's where an animal or a bird of prey can communicate to us and give us guidance, because that animal is also tuned in to the web of life. And modern terms for that is the field or the zone, quantum field. And if we alter our consciousness, which is what shamans are experts at, going into an altered state of consciousness, then the trees can communicate to us, animals can communicate to us, and we can understand them. We can tune into their language. This is the soul that is capable of that. The mind does not understand the language of the hawk or the buzzard, but the soul does, and your heart has a good idea about it also. So shamanism is ultimately very much about living more from the heart than just from the mind, and being tuned into the soul and being in touch with your spirit, being part of the great web of life, as opposed to just being oneself and isolated and separated, which is seen to be a disease of a modern Western lifestyle. Isolation, which causes a lot of illness and psychological problems for people. But signs and omens, they come from the web of life where everything is connected.
Oh, I'm so glad that we ended on that. Like, it just feels like the perfect ending to this show. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. I just loved this conversation. I really did. Is there anything that you would suggest next as a kind of next step for listeners?
Well, first of all, it's a real good idea to begin to become more still and listen to that intuitive whisper. And in order to hear it, we need to be still. So that can be done through meditation practices and just through the intention to want to be in touch with the intuition. And then if people want to practice and learn that other way, the planned way, as opposed to the more chaotic way where it comes out of the blue, then it is a skill that can be learned. So you can train that. You can maybe find somebody who teaches that, and together with other people. It's often a good idea to have a buddy that you can train with, and you can test each other, and you can have a lot of fun with training intuition. And but also by yourself, if you walking down the street and you tune in, what am I going to see around the corner? And then train your intuition that way. So there are many ways, and to say yes to it, and to really open up to it and invest some time and energy into it, it comes back manifold.
Yeah.
And,
beautiful. Really, really.
And then also
wonderful.
to just to be aware that there are things that we are not supposed to know. So sometimes the intuition will not tell us certain things, and that is simply because it's better that we don't know.
Yeah.
There can be highly developed clairvoyants who have both clarity and wisdom, and sometimes they choose not to say anything, even though they do know, but they don't tell people because it is sometimes the wisest thing. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Chris. Where can people go find out more about you and your work and your books and all that good stuff?
I have a website called Northern Drum, northerndrum.com. And I have written 2 books. One is called Calling Us Home. And the other one is called Spirit Animal Guides. And both of those books talk about instincts and intuition and developing those abilities.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure for me too. And thank you for inviting me.
Oh, wow. What an amazing show. Here are my takeaways. Intuition is a practical tool for survival in Indigenous cultures, and especially for the shamans. It's not just a new agey, nice to have thing. The difference between instinct and intuition is that instinct is sourced in the lizard brain. It's focused on the now, whereas intuition is from the soul and is accessed through the heart and the third eye. Intuition can be both spontaneous and also something we can proactively choose to listen to. Learn how intuition speaks to you. Find someone to learn from. Buddy up. Play with ways to tune into it. For example, asking yourself what's around the next corner. If you'd like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, including links to Chris's courses and books, hop on over to the show notes and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 349. And if you are feeling the call to be your medicine, you're feeling the call to join us for Waking the Wild Medicine, go take a look at primalhappiness.co/medicine now. And you can book yourself a call with me or Jonathan to explore fully if indeed it is aligned for your soul. If you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or your app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode automatically straight to your device as soon as it's released. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.